Bitcoin is a global decentralized organization. It's the first of its kind, right? So it's a leaderless, CEO-less organization, and it has a gigantic market cap. It's been stunningly successful in what it set out to do. And to your point, the individuals inside of that network are maximally sovereign or individually empowered. Their will to power is being honored such that they don't suffer kings, right? There's not an opportunity for political authorities to rise to power as much in a Bitcoinized world, because citizens can always vote with their wallet or vote with their feet. If you're not treating me well in a certain jurisdiction, I can take my capital and leave very easily, which is, obviously in countries today, a lot of that's inhibited through capital controls and all kinds of other bureaucratic machinations. So all we're talking about here is increasing the individual will to power holds the symbolic structure of government in check, right? It makes it accountable to its P&L and therefore accountable to its customers, which are citizens. That, I would say, is kind of the core problem we have on the fiat standard, is that government doesn't care about its P&L because it can paper over all of its losses by printing new money. That's why we get all these antiquated government organizations that never go away. And if you're not accountable to your P&L as an organization, why do you care about the preferences of your customers? You can just steal from your customers. So that, this is the problem. This is the human problem right now, is that we have the dominant symbolic structure in the world extracts from us, and we don't have a way to cast, well, pre-Bitcoin, we did not have a way to cast a credible vote of no confidence and say, this doesn't work for me, Uncle Sam. I'm going to do something different. And Bitcoin is an emergent alternative to the whole game, right? It's like the first level playing field we've ever had, or the first true, equitable story, whatever you want to call it.
I almost think in some crazy way, if you've ever played backyard football or street football, and let's say it was in a neighborhood as a kid, and you showed up and you kind of sort of knew the kids, they lived in the neighborhood or in the general area, and you're playing a game and you pretty much knew almost immediately, like, hey, this is a game where the rules are very well defined, or like, you stepped out of bounds. Where's that of bounds? It's like kind of like lined up here, and you would very quickly be able to tell, like, oh, these people are going to bend the rules, however, to try to gain an advantage in the game. In many cases, although, yes, we do have the rules written down, we have seen those rules changed in what I'll call the legacy world. And so that can be around taxation, that can be around monetary policy, that can be around fiscal policy, and that can be around a whole bunch of other aspects. It is not to argue that they don't have the power to change the rules. They do. It is not to argue even sometimes that the rule changes aren't positive. Sometimes they are positive. But it is just that the rules can change unilaterally based on those in power. Yes, and there's unpredictability. The difference is if you showed up to play that backyard football and they had basically a granite, tablet and they had chiseled the rules in and it said, these are the rules. If you play the game, these are the rules we play by.
Yes.
And now there is no debate.
Yes.
It is, there are the rules and no one's going to walk over even with a eraser and a marker and, let me erase rule number 3 and write a different one. It is, they are literally chiseled into granite. That is two different environments. And that's, I think, ultimately what we're talking about is this like analogous situation where you cannot change the monetary policy.
Right. Yes.
And it does not matter how many people you get that want to do that. Because there have been people who have wanted to change, whether it's monetary policy, technical components, whatever. And they have even been able to loosely coordinate with more than 50% of the hash rate in the miners. Still cannot do it.
Right.
And this idea, which I haven't heard a lot of people explore, is that in the United States government, which I think most people would look at and point and say, this is a democratic government, and it's the best that we've seen so far. Can somebody come up with a better solution? Maybe. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. But right now, this seems to be the best way of governance that the world has ever seen. We have 3 branches of government. And those 3 branches of government provide checks and balances on each other. In the Bitcoin ecosystem, we also have 3 branches. You have the developers, you have the nodes, and you have the miners. And those 3 branches of Bitcoin end up providing checks and balances on each other. And so when you compare those two things, I don't know if people can argue that there is a better way to actually protect the rules of economic trade than what we already know is the best system of governance we've ever created. We simply are now just copying and pasting it via software and technology for this new system.
Yeah. It's an upgrade of what the the spirit of the U.S. Constitution lives in Bitcoin.
Yes.
Right. And that the idea of the rules chiseled in granite, the immutable rule set, I would argue that is the bedrock of peaceful gameplay.
Yes.
I've talked about this a lot, right? If you sit down to play poker and the hand rankings or rules change every few hands, you're just going to go nuts, right? You can't play the game. How can you form a productive strategy when the rules are changing all the time? There's too much unpredictability in the system. So that's all we're saying with Bitcoin. It's like, just give us a level playing field and let people play the game of the market process, and let's just create as much wealth as possible to solve as many problems as possible.
Yes.
And the further point to it is that when they're immutable and changeless and open and transparent, it's all opt-in, right? No one's forcing you to use Bitcoin. And in the episode I did with Jordan Peterson, he talked about this, that it's kind of obvious. Kids only like to play games that are voluntary, right? As soon as you try to go and play a game with kids, like, here are the new rules and like, okay, bully, we're going to go over here and play, right? So there's this natural inclination to organize around the rules that are voluntary, open, clear, changeless. And kids do it. Like, how about we start doing it as adults, right? We actually learn something from kids in this respect. So to try to bring this thing full circle, as we said at the beginning, money is a proxy for power. And I decompose power into physical and a political sense. And I think Bitcoin is the best proxy for power we've ever had, in that it's a story that can't be rewritten by those that wield violence, right? This is very important. It's a story that can't be rewritten by the winners. It's a property relationship. So again, relationship between owner and asset that's virtually independent of the monopoly on violence. Like, if you hold your private keys in a proper custody schema, and I always recommend multi-signature, distributed geographically, you're very independent or isolated from the political apparatus. There's no law passing that can change anything. There's no confiscation or inflation that's going to affect you. And it's an incentive structure. It's a brand new symbolic structure that has very strong incentives that tilts all of humanity away from warfare and towards peace. And this is like probably the most beautiful promise of the whole thing. And it's a good proxy for power, in my opinion, because it's rooted in physical power through proof of work. You have to spend energy to gain the purchasing power stored therein. And it's also so that it's like gold in that respect, but unlike gold, it's more resistant to political power because it's dematerialized, to use Saylor's awesome word. And it has this, I would even say the Satoshi creation myth is part of this as well, right? It's a foundational to that symbolic structure, to the idea of decentralization that's encoded into Bitcoin. And it's the reason these other projects can't seem to achieve decentralization, right? They can't get the magic of that in a bottle. Not to say that it's not possible, but it's proven to be damn hard so far.